Malava Malka talking about getting fat. Here we've got to have another meal on Motzei Shabbos. And here, the very next halach, isn't that interesting how these things just segue one into the other? I've been waiting to use that word for a while, actually.
I thought it was Sedgway.
That's something else, isn't it?
Oh, okay, sorry.
Women are supposed to have a Malava Malka as well, right? It's not a mitzvah. Pardon?
I'm just supposed to cook you first of all.
Yeah, obviously. Obviously. There's actually, according to some of the early authorities, there was a custom that women didn't do any malacha on Motzei Shabbos until after they ate the Malava Malka.
Oh, that's a good one.
maybe that's why the minig is to eat the Malava Malka as early as possible.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's interesting that the great Hasidic Rebbe, Rav Elimelech Milizhinsk, so he writes that a Malava Malka for women to eat a Malava Malka is a segula, it's an omen for having an easy labor. Right? Whatever, when I was a kid growing up, the Prime Minister of England was somebody called Margaret Thatcher, who was actually a woman, and she was a conservative. And they said that if she would become pregnant, she would be the first conservative leader to go into labour.
Well,
I think the younger generation obviously just don't appreciate that.
About English politics.
Neither do I.
It's not necessarily English.
There are two parties, Labour and what's the other one?
Conservatives.
Labour. There's no Labour Party in America, is there?
No, but there's right to left.
Yeah.
They're all the same. It's all the same all over the place. It just depends what you call them. That's all. Democrats and Republicans are the equivalent of the Labour and the Conservative. It's not. Don't worry. Okay, but say here, you should, when you eat your Malava Malka, you should wear your Shabbos clothing. Don't get dressed into non-Shabbos clothing. That was a bit clumsy. Yeah. Whatever. I got away with it though. Some people actually have the minig not to take off Shabbos clothing at all. On Motzei Shabbos until you go to sleep. Obviously, at some point it's going to come off. Some people are careful not to write before they eat the Malava Malka. Why is that? So this is sort of somewhat Kabbalistic, but according to the concept of a person receives a neshama yesera, an additional dimension of a neshama, of a soul, which is introduced into your body for Shabbos. So according to some of the Kabbalistic Sfarim, it doesn't leave entirely until after the Malava Malka. Even though, when we spoke about Havdalah, right, we spoke about the idea of using the Besamim, and we need the Besamim in order to solve our feelings of sorrow that the Neshama Yisera is leaving the body, but nevertheless, apparently some of it remains behind until after the Malava Malka has been eaten, and that's why many people don't have the minhag to do major malacha until after they finish their Malava Malka.
Rabbi Lauffer, halachically, what is the maximum that you can go before you can't do it anymore? I know that there are people who extend Shabbos considerably.
Yeah.
Like what is the maximum? Can you?
What is the maximum for what? Which part?
That halachically, Shabbos could be extended.
Oh, I mean, the truth of the matter is, if you really want to let yourself go, you can keep going until Tuesday with Shabbos. It's mutter to continue. It's mutter to say Havdalah until Tuesday, including Tuesday, right? Which means that in theory you could keep Shabbos until then. There's nothing really. It's not accurate what I'm about to say. I was going to say there's nothing really stopping you from bringing Shabbos out at whatever time you do. You can keep going. However, the Malava Malka, right, as we learnt last week, whenever it was, I can't remember, should be eaten up until Chatzos Halayla, until midnight. Right? So if that's the case, then by the time you get to by then you're supposed to have taken Shabbos out.
So how can you reconcile that?
How to reconcile the idea? The truth of the matter is that Havdalah is being able to make Havdalah until Tuesday has got less to do with keeping Shabbos and more to do with whether you can make Havdalah or not. Which means that sometimes when Shabbos goes out very late, it's not shaykh to make Havdalah on Saturday night, right? So you make Havdalah on Sunday morning. The person doesn't have what he needs in order to make Havdalah. So then you can push it off. You can make Havdalah up to Tuesday because the residue of Shabbos is still there. And then on Wednesday we start preparing for Shabbos again, which we spoke about all of this way back when. But that's the reason why in the Shir Shel Yom, the Psalm of the day for Wednesday, the bottom we say L'chun Ranana, which is the beginning, the opening salvo of Kabbalah Shabbos, what we recite on Friday night. Because it's just telling us that it's Wednesday. It's time to start preparing for Shabbos again. Got to get ready.
I just something that came to mind that as you were saying that it seems to be looking back over the recent past and what Shabbos meals I've been invited to attend. Almost always the invitation comes on a Wednesday.
Really?
Like Wednesday night.
Gosh, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
How about that?
Yeah, I don't know why. It seems to be.
Another name that is given to the Melava Malka is Sudas David HaMelech, the meal of King David. So let's try to work out where that is. Sudas David HaMelech, Sudas David HaMoshiach, it's called sometimes, or Sudas David Meshicha. So some people, you'll see, if you're around at somebody's house and you've been invited to a Melava Malka, you may find that they have the custom before they begin the Melava Malka to say in Aramaic, they'll say, "Du hi Sudasa de David Malka," or Meshicha, that this is the Suda of David, of King David. Right? Why is that? So let's have a look and see. There are a few reasons that are given why it might be called Sudas David HaMashiach as opposed to anybody else. So it says like this, that the Gemara in Shabbos says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed to King David that he was going to die on Shabbos. So every Motzei Shabbos, if he hadn't died, he made a Suda to celebrate the fact that he was going to have a whole week's worth of life ahead of him. Something else, that's one reason, right? Something else which is much more Kabbalistic, something very fascinating actually, is that we've got these 4 meals on Shabbos, right? So we've got the 3 meals during Shabbos and the 4th meal that's eaten after Shabbos, and they are supposed to tap into some kind of ability to tap into the heavenly mercy, right? What's called Rachmei Shamayim, the compassion of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the four meals that we have on Shabbos, they tap into Rachmei Shamayim. They bring us closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's something absolutely beautiful. So the first meal that we eat on Friday night that's Avram Avinu. We're going to tap into the koiches, the power of Avram Avinu, and he saves Klal Yisrael from the severity of Gehenna. There's a very beautiful medrash. The medrash says that Avram Avinu sits at the gates of Gehenna, and anybody who comes down who is circumcised, he tries to pull them out of there, get them away from Gehenna. With 2 exceptions, right? One of the exceptions is that a man who marries a non-Jewish woman, then at that point Avram Avinu does not go to bat for that person. He doesn't try to get that person out. That person's he's going down, I guess. So the first meal that we eat, don't worry about that. He just got the joke from a couple of days ago.
I just feel like that's in the How to Prevent Intermarriage book. There's a minhag that says that Abraham sits at Gehenna, and if you marry a non-Jewish woman, he's not going to help you.
Am I in trouble if I'm already married to a non-Jewish woman?
What if I'm married to 5? It doesn't count, right?
Are you in trouble? I would say it's a problem. Yeah, no. But it's okay. We can sort something out. There's a cute. Jewish humor is something which is normally funny, but it's also pretty deep as well. And there's a story about a fellow Jewish boy from an assimilated home who, comes from a wealthy house, and one day he's going out with a non-Jewish girl and he decides he's getting married. So they get married. His parents are very much against the marriage because, Jewish boys and Jewish girls should get married to each other and not to non-Jewish boys and non-Jewish girls. And whatever they get married. And anyway, at some point, before they get married, so the father decides that she's really got to convert. We got to do something over here. Can't have him married to somebody non-Jewish, right? So in the end, she does a little bit of a conversion, and then she starts reading up a little bit about Judaism. And anyway, one day on Shabbos morning, her husband gets up. He's got to go to work, right? Works for his daddy in his daddy's factory. And she says to him, "Where are you going?" He says, "Well, I'm going to work." So she says, "But I read in a book that you're not supposed to work on Shabbos." So he says, "Yeah, but I can't not go to work. Daddy will be very upset. I can't tell him that it's Shabbos and I can't go to work." So she says, "I don't know, but it says in the book that you're not supposed to go to work, right? What are you supposed to do?" So he says, "I don't know." So he phones through to work and he says, "Listen," he says, "I don't feel well today." He says, I can't come in." So fine, doesn't come in. Anyway, next week, repeats itself again. She says, he gets up to go to work. He says, "Where are you going?" He says, "I'm going off to work." She says, "You can't go to work. It's the Shabbos today. You're not allowed to work on Shabbos." So he says, "Well, what am I supposed to do?" She says, "I don't know." She says, "But you can't go to work." So he says, "Okay, you know what, I'll phone through and I'll tell them that I'm not feeling well again." She says, "No," she says, "I read in that book that you're not supposed to phone people on Shabbos either." So he says, "Well, what do I do now?" So she says, "I don't know." She says, "But it's Shabbos and you can't do these things." So he says, "Oh, okay." So he doesn't do anything. And on Monday, when he goes into work, he says, "I'm terribly sorry." He says, I was so sick on Shabbos. On Saturday, I was so sick, I couldn't come in. He said, "I couldn't even pick up the phone. I was that sick." Next Saturday morning, same thing again. So she said, so he's sitting at home reading the newspaper, not sure what he's supposed to do with himself, and there's a ring at the doorbell. So he gets up, he opens his door, and his daddy's at the door. And he says to him, "Frank, what are you doing? Why aren't you at work?" He says, "Daddy," he says, I don't feel..." He said, "Don't tell me you don't feel well." He says, "You look the very picture of good health. What's going on over here?" So he says, well, Daddy, it's Christina. She said that it's Shabbos and I can't go to work." He says, "I told you not to get married to a non-Jewish girl." That's Jewish humour. So whatever. I guess it didn't sort of trickle down to the end of the table over there.
Yeah, it was really funny.
Thank you. Good. I'm pleased you like that. Anyway, meal number one is we're tapping into the spiritual dimensions of Avram Avinu. Meal number two in the morning. So it says that Yitzchak Avinu is going to come and save us from Chevlei Moshiach. When the Mashiach comes, before the Mashiach comes, it's going to be a difficult time. So the first meal that we eat is going to save us from Gehenna. The second meal that we're going to eat is going to help alleviate the pain of the pre-Messianic era. The third meal of Yaakov Avinu is, in the merit of Yaakov Avinu, is going to help save us from the Milchemes Gog and Magog that we spoke about a little bit, this war of Gog and Magog, what's called Armageddon, right? Why is it called Armageddon?
Because I'm getting out of here.
Thank you. At least somebody remembered something, that's good. And the fourth meal that we eat, the Melava Malka, so that David HaMelech is going to save us from what's called Chibut HaKever. What goes on inside of the grave, which we don't really want to know, which is the worms and the
experience.
Huh?
It's a worm experience.
It's definitely an experience, which means that the connection between the Melava Malka and David HaMelech is that he's going to save us from Chibut HaKever. This fellow goes to Vienna. The trials, the tribulations of the grave. This fellow goes to Vienna, and he wants to do a little bit of sightseeing. So he goes off to the famous cemetery over there, and he sees Mozart's grave. So he goes over and he hears bizarre music, really as odd as can be. So fine, doesn't think too much about it, goes away. Then he comes back, he listens again. And he's beginning to think to himself that it's vaguely familiar somehow, but something's not right. So he goes back, has a piece of strudel, and then comes back again. And he goes back and he's listening, and finally he realizes that he's listening to the Ninth Symphony backwards. So he goes over to the person, there's like a fellow who's over there who looks after the graves and everything, and he says to him, look, he says, very odd, he says, but, in Mozart's grave, I can hear the Ninth Symphony being played backwards. He said, yeah, that's okay. He said, it's just Mozart decomposing. That is chibat akeva, to decompose. Eating a malava malka, right, aside from being a mitzvah, interestingly enough, it's full of things that are going to help us, various good things, what are called segulot. I have really no idea how to, maybe omens, I'm not quite sure how you translate segulot, but segulot are good things that happen to you when you do something. So, for example, the malava malka, so the Gemara in Shabbos says that it's a refuah, it heals you. A person's not well, so the malava malka heals you. In different places it says that a malava malka is a segula for having a good parnosa, for having a good livelihood.
Okay, no, I know why I'm going to
In other places it says that it's a segula for arichas yomim, that it gives you long life.
That's a good thing.
Right? Again, it's interesting, isn't it, that we're stuffing ourselves with Jewish food, which is the very epitome of a short life. And some Jewish food, you feel your arteries, bless you. Gosh, stop making a spectacle of yourself. Some Jewish foods you can feel your arteries clogging up before you even eat the stuff. You just look at it and it's like, but apparently if you eat a malava malka, it will give you arichas yomim. In another place it says that you'll have children. Another place, interesting enough, again, I think all of these things are pretty fascinating. This list that appears, it's something really quite all-encompassing. It says that it's something called tikkun abris, that mistakes that we've made, in sexual relationships. So it's easy. It helps you to sort of re-establish your holiness. Like I mentioned before, the Rebbe, Reb Melech from Lezhinsk, he says that it's good for labor, it gives you an easy labor. And in general, also in the name of the Rebbe, it says that it's Yeshua's, and Yeshua's is like taking care of all your problems. So malava malka is it's incredible. It's got this incredible dimension to it, which is why, interestingly enough, in certain svarim it says that a person should be very careful not to have any machloikas in their home, no arguments in their home on Motzei Shabbos. And why is that? Because after a person has been through Shabbos, and Shabbos is Me'ein Olam Haba, it's something which draws us up to the spiritual realms and connects us with Hashem. On Motzei Shabbos, the Yetzer Hara works very, very hard to try to dismantle whatever has been built over Shabbos, and he tries to destroy what's called the Shalom Bayis. Right? Shalom Bayis is that the harmony that exists inside of the home. And a person needs to try very, very hard not to get involved in machlokas on Motzei Shabbos, because this is a very, very special time where we can tap into all kinds of uplifting and spiritual dimensions. It's interesting that there's a minig, there's a minig that's on Motzei Shabbos, that for husbands when they come home, that they fold up their talis straight away, and that's going to give them, shlom bayis. What is the source of the minig is what? That if you help a little bit in the house, that's where the shlom bayis is going to be. So that they say, I don't know if this is true or not, or it's apocryphal, but it's 100% applicable, that's for sure. They say in the name of that somebody once went to Rav Gifter, the famous Rosh Hashiva tells in Chicago, and they asked him, what is it to fold up the talis? He says, is it really a school of Shlom Bayis? He said, no, folding up your shirt sleeves and washing up the dishes is though. Right? Here it's like, a place is an absolute tip. There's dirty dishes everywhere. The kids have strewn every single toy that they possess all over the place. And a husband comes home and folds up his talis. And it's like, that's it. we're going to have shlom bayis now. And yeah, no, fold up your sleeves and do something. If you're like me, again, as I might have mentioned in the past, working is not something that I'm particularly good at. So if you're like me, you'll probably expend. You'll expend more energy not working than if you just did what you were supposed to do to begin with. Yeah. So I'll sort of like walk around all over the place, looking busy and like up and down and in and out and and it's like it's good, it works. I learned that from one of my teachers in school. Years ago, I had an English teacher who told me that in his summer vacation, he went to work in a supermarket. And the first day that he was there, they asked him to stack the shelves. They gave him cans. And they told him to stack the shelves. And it's difficult because you've got to bring all the old cans have to come to the front so they get sold first. And all the new cans have to go in at the back. And he was given, because he was new, he was given all the shelves that were just above head level. So he's like all day long, he's like this, moving cans around. And he said he came home, he said he was exhausted. He woke up the next morning, he was all stiff. He said it was terrible. So he goes to work the next day, and the same thing all over again. So he says to himself, I'm not doing this anymore. He says, I refuse. So the next morning, he said, on the third day, he came to work with a clipboard and a pencil. And he spent the whole day just walking up and down the aisles, scribbling things down. And he said not one person stopped to ask him what he was doing. And he said that he learned the most important life lesson of all, which is you just have to look busy. Which is the only lesson that I learned that I can remember from what he taught us in English. Of 4 years worth of being taught by this fellow, the only lesson that I can actually remember is look busy. You heard it from me first.
So how many dishes do you have to bake in Shana Shana? Get out of the kitchen.
Just the one. Just the one.
It's inherited from your grandma.
Yeah. It's an interesting. There's a beautiful story they tell about somebody, a very poor man who went to get a blessing from the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Chassidut. And the Baal Shem Tov told him like this. He says, take whatever money you've got, and get whatever you get involved in. The first thing you get involved in after you leave, that's going to bring you the most incredible source of success. So he goes rushing home. He's got a few coins left hidden away, behind the fireplace somewhere. And he goes rushing home, and he wants to get him out. And his wife says to him, like, what are you doing? And he says, don't bother me now, I'm in the middle of something. This is important. And she says, no, tell me what you're doing. And he says, no, not now, this is not the moment. And she says, no, you're not leaving here until you tell me what. And they have the most unbelievable row, just enormous. Never had a row like it before in his life with his wife. So anyway, finally they get to the end of their argument, and he takes the money, and he goes and invests it in something, and the whole thing just flops. Loses everything. So he goes back to the Baal Shem Tov and he says, Rebbe, I don't understand. You told me that the first thing that I invested in, it was going to have the most incredible success. He said, I lost all my money. So the Baal Shem Tov says, hold on a second, that can't be. He says, tell me what happened. So he told him what happened, and he said that he went home and he had this enormous row with his wife, and he says, he said, that was the first thing you got involved in, and you had the most enormous success, right? So be careful what you invest your various talents in, and in worst case scenario, help at home. If there's absolutely no way that you can get out of it, then pick up a towel and as Gabriel mentioned, pick up the most expensive plate that you've got and drop it, and that'll probably be the last time that you have to help in the house. Good. There's more. Okay, Beseda. Bichsa Mazon on Motzei Shabbos. How do you bench after you've made the Melava Malka, you've eaten your Melava Malka, and you need to bench? So is it Shabbos or isn't it Shabbos? When you come to benching, it's interesting. So most poskim rule that you don't say Shir Amalos when you begin benching, right? You know that when on special days we begin benching with Shir Amalos. Most authorities rule that you don't.
Is that the Babylon?
So it's got it. There are two versions. One is Shir Amalos, the other one is Al Naras Bavel on the banks of the Al-Nara's bubble on the banks of the river of Babylon. Thank you. I got stuck over there somewhere.
So that's the one you're talking about?
Yeah. So no, I'm talking about Shir Amalois,
Okay.
right? Which you say on Shabbos.
Yeah.
So according to most authorities, you don't say it when you eat your Malava Malka. So you should say Al Nara's bubble. That's the bit that you should say on the rivers of Babylon. Thank you. And I remember how it goes, right? Interestingly enough, though, at benching, when you're benching, you should still say Migdal instead of Magdil. Now, again, I don't want to confuse anybody, but it looks like it's been done already, so it's not really such a big deal. However, when you come to bench on Shabbos and Yom Tov, we say Migdal at the end, towards the end of benching. Migdal Yeshuot Malka, but during the rest of the week we say Magdil Yeshuot Malka, right? And interestingly enough, even though we don't say Shir HaMalois at the beginning of benching, nevertheless we do say Migdal instead of Magdil. Just an interesting dimension.
Why is that?
It's to do with the fact that, I don't know, that there's sort of like the Shirayim of Shabbos is still there. And because it's not really, we haven't really started the weekday yet. We're still in the inside of the Malava Malka. If you ask me, the real kasha over here is why we don't say Shir HaMalois.
What's with Ritzeh?
Huh?
What's with Ritzeh?
Ritzeh you don't say because you've davened the Once you said Atachal Montano, then you're done. So even if you were to say Atachal Montano and then go back to bench, you wouldn't be able to say Ritzeh anymore anyway, right? So that's like a technical issue. It's fascinating that we've got this kind of you've got a little bit of everything. So no Shir HaMalois and Migdal is an interesting combination, which does not seem to fascinate too many people over here. So
what's the whole thing of Mikdal Makdal anyway? What?
Emphasis,
what does it tell you?
I don't know.
And my wife told me once that she was like on the Vay campus, and there was like she was a madricha already, and there was another girl who was like just say Mikdal Makdal. And she was like, whatever, it doesn't matter, it's not so important. The girl was like, what do you mean? My grandfather wrote a whole sefer on it. So there must be something to it.
Yeah, that sounds okay to me.
Sounds like the sefer we need.
That could be the next sefer that you learn after you finish Birkas Kohanim. The evidence, I looked into this before. You know, Migdal and Magdil, two different cases that appear inside of inside of Nach. The difference between them, I don't know. I really don't. But it's interesting that one of them is used during the week, one of them is used only on Shabbos. When I was, I don't think this is true. But when I was a kid growing up, they say that the origin of Migdal came from that because it says Magdil and it comes from Shmuel Beis. And some person when he was sorting things out and printing a birkon of some kind or a siddur of some kind, so he obviously didn't understand that Shin Bet meant Shmuel Beis and assumed that it must have meant Shabbos, and he just wrote Shabbos over there, and from then on we say Migdal on Shabbos instead of Magdil. It's not true. It really isn't. I don't know. Even though you may not eat a Malava Malka with bread during the rest of the year, there is a inyan on the Sefer Matei Ephraim brings down that there's an inyan on Motzei Shabbos Tshuva, which is the Motzei Shabbos between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, to be careful to wash and to eat bread with the Malava Malka for that week. Again, that's the week, the 10 days of repentance. That's the week that we're doing our best to do things in the best way that we can, and we're more careful with everything that we do. During just small, yeah.
Do you eat it without bread?
Malava Malka, you can fulfill your obligation with Malava Malka by having cakes. It's the best way to do it is with bread, but if you feel that you're just not up to eating it with bread right now, there isn't any bread to eat, bless you, or you feel that there isn't any bread to eat, so you can fulfill the mitzvah by using bread or even using cake or by using fruit. Some people even hold that if you eat meat, even if you don't wash, if you eat meat, then that's also fulfilling the mitzvah of a Malava Malka. What about eating meat during the 9 days? You know that we've got this period between Rosh Chodesh Av and Tisha B'Av, where there's always going to be a Shabbos that's going to fall in between. What about then, during the 9 days we don't eat meat? So what are you supposed to do at the Malava Malka? So poskim, I think the correct way to follow is that somebody who is careful to eat meat with his Malava Malka throughout the year can eat meat on Malava Malka of the 9 days. But somebody who's not careful, they eat a Malava Malka, they're just not careful to eat meat every time, so they should be careful not to eat meat on the Malava Malka of the 9 days. Just one last thing over here. Eating a Malava Malka, do you need to eat one on after Yom Tov? On Motzoi Yom Tov, are you supposed to eat a Malava Malka, yes or no? So I think most of the poskim are of the opinion that there is no obligation whatsoever to eat a Malava Malka Motzoi Yom Tov when Yom Tov goes out. And that seems to be the way that most people go according to that opinion. One of the reasons it's brought down is because that, according to many opinions, there is no neshama yasera on Yom Tov. You don't have this additional dimension of the soul on Yom Tov that you have on Shabbos, and therefore you don't have to have the Malava Malka. However, there are some poskim, there are some authorities, including some pretty big hitters like the Chazon Ish, that who were makpid to eat a Malava Malka on Motzei Yom Tov as well. Whatever you do, it's going to be right. Which means if you do, then that's great, and if you don't, then that's great too. Okay, that really brings us to the end of the halachas of Malava Malka.
What's the reasoning? Because
it's an interesting machlokes about what the neshama yasera, that if you have simcha yasera, which is what you have on Yom Tov, right, and that's why it says on Yom Tov, right, that if you have simcha yasera, then that is the dimension of the neshama yasera, which means there's something there. It's not a neshama yasera, it's a simcha yasera, and if that's the case, then the Malava Malka should be eaten. There's a machlokes altogether. It's true that most of the poskim seem to be of the opinion that there is no neshama yasera on Yom Tov, but some of them say there is. And some of them say that because you have the simcha yasera, the Torah doesn't need to tell you that there's a neshama yasera. Right? So those people who hold that there is a neshama yasera, then for sure you're going to need to eat a Malava Malka Motzei Yom Tov. And if you do, you do. And if you don't, you don't. That brings us to the end of the halachas of Malava Malka. Tomorrow, of course, is the best day of the week because I don't have to come in. And we will meet back again in Mirz Hashem on Sunday, as always, bleary-eyed, hungover, wishing to be anywhere else but here. And we will start learning the halachas of Hanukkah.
Oh, yes.